All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's start this conversation. I'd like to hear your views as well. We're talking about a myriad of issues, but let's start with tracing the billions. We know now that the counties were given 13.1 billion shillings. They seem to have only used about 3 billion shillings. That's according to the Senate Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19 that is tracing the money in the counties. They say that the rest of the money is either unaccounted for or has been used for different purposes. That's besides the point. KEMSA is also another issue where the CS now says that he did not give any direct instructions to the suspended CEO, Jonah Manjari, and says that if you made a mistake, you did it on your own. In fact, that quote is right here on the front page of the Daily Nation. The CS says, "At no time did I propose to anyone not to follow procurement rules. If you go wrong, it's not because the CS told you. It's because you're a poor manager." This is the conversation we want to start with, and then we get into the issue of Obado's ouster, and then later on we talk about the revenue divide in the Senate. Let me introduce my guests real quick. Honorable Samson Cherargei is the Nandi Senator, is with us, and Honorable John Kagusha is also with us, Nyeri County Assembly Speaker, and Steve Ogola, an advocate of the High Court, to make heads and tails of this conversation. And Senator Cherargei, I'll start with you. On the KEMSA scandal, has this war against graft, particularly in KEMSA, been politicized from where you stand?
Thank you, my brother Trevor, for having me, and good morning. It's good to see you again after a long time. Secondly is that I want to say, of course, it has been politicized, and our brothers from the ODM side, of course, have taken a stand already by demanding that there should be a special audit on the funds of KEMSA. But when we sat last week through the Senate Ad Hoc Committee, there are so many issues that shows that there is a mega scandal within KEMSA. First, by overshooting their budget from 4.5 billion to 7.5 billion. The issues of donation from Jack Ma and Alibaba, among others, was not clear because they didn't even give distribution list or the issues that were given. The third is when the suspended CEO, Jonah Manjari, when I questioned him on the floor of the House on Friday, he accepted that there were specific instructions from the PS Susan Muchaje of Health and Cabinet Secretary in charge of Health, Mutai Kagwe. So it shows there was a pointer, and you have had even the pricing of some of the essentials that were needed, like masks, among other things, PPEs. Of course, this has been well orchestrated by KEMSA. So it means there was a breach of trust, there is corruption, and of course, there was none unaccountability. We were shocked personally when I saw the ODM as a party, which pride itself having being one of the four fighters of anti-corruption in this country. And remember, even when they came with the handshake with Jubilee, they had indicated that out of the 9.1 of them was to fight corruption. So we were shocked when, instead of calling upon that there should be resignation or stepping aside of the officials, that the audit be done. And I think, Maura, it is important that, and also the president the other day during virtual conference with Council of Governors, he said he's giving out 21 days for investigation. So how can you investigate somebody who is in office? So all this is political gerrymandering, and I think if we don't take care, we might not know what really happened with the KEMSA scandal that has happened of late. So in my opinion, of course, it has been politicized, but that one should not give time to investigative agencies to take the eyes off the ball. We need to know what really happened, because we also have donors who have threatened to pull out in terms of funding KEMSA. And secondly and finally, is, as you have rightly said, I think it is your station who run is it the audit or controller budget on the usage of COVID funds across counties. And you could see also the counties have taken cue, because our counties were buying up to 9,000 to 10,000 by PPE. Some counties were buying even television sets, and therefore, and even other counties were also using up to 360,000 airtime. And some of the counties also have not even paid the COVID medical allowances to the frontline workers. Okay. And when that report came before the Senate committee, is very shocking, and we think this matter should be dealt with exhaustively. And the people, and I want to call upon, and article, as I finish, under Article 2256, Article 225, Sub-Article 5 of the Constitution, the responsibility squarely stops with the minister in charge of health. So he can't feign ignorance or feign selective amnesia on this issue.
So, Cherargei, before I go to bring in the other panelists we have here, you're saying that this war has been politicized and you want people to take responsibility. The CEO for KEMSA, Jonah Manjari, has already been suspended. Who else do you want to step aside?
You have rightly heard me talking about Article 225, sub-Article 6, and it is good you have quite a number of lawyers in the panelists, including my classmate Steve Ogola. It's very important that the buck stops with the cabinet secretary in charge of health, and cabinet secretary Senator Mutahi Kagwe must step aside. PS Susan Muchaje must step aside, because the CEO before the floor of the House, and it is before the answer can be printed, that he said under oath. It did not say it somewhere, by the way. He said under oath before the floor of the House of the Senate. So these are the people that have been implicated, and the president has ordered investigation on the same matter within 21 days. So how can you investigate somebody who is in office? They must take political responsibility, and in terms of they failed Kenya in terms of due diligence, because we are wondering, when they were telling us that COVID cases were rising, they were also perpetuating another pandemic called corruption within the Ministry of Health, and they must take responsibility and step aside. And finally, if they don't step aside as a parliament, and I've talked to my colleagues in the National Assembly, that next week when he resumes sittings, they must prepare a censure motion in the floor of the National Assembly, and they must be censured, both of them, the PS in charge of health and the minister in charge of health, Mutahi Kagwe.
Is that the plan going forward? Who's going to prepare the censure motion?
I've engaged in quite a number of members of National Assembly, knowing that the issue of preparing censure motion is within the purview and domain of the National Assembly. I'm talking to quite a number of members of National Assembly, and Kenyans will know in fullness, probably by next week, who the member is likely to move the censure motion if the minister and the PS do not step aside. And I think as a Senate, if we had such powers, I can assure you, since the appointing authority have failed Kenyans, we would have taken the cue and ensured that he is removed from office.
Okay. Let me bring in Steve Ogola on this. Ogola, you're an advocate of the High Court. Now, how does this play out based on the Constitution and based on our legal procedure here in the country now? The CEO for KEMSA, John Manjari, has already been suspended. He says he was being given instructions by the CS and the PS. The CS and the PS deny that. In fact, they say at no time did they propose to anyone not to follow procurement rules. Ogola?
I think, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I think,
yes.
I agree with Senator Samson Cherargei that both the CS, the PS, and the CEO of KEMSA need to step aside for practical science purposes. Now, it is not acceptable in the law for the CEO of KEMSA to claim to have been receiving instructions from the CS. In fact, if he did so, the more reason why he needs to step aside and even resign in totality. Because the procedures for procurement are laid out in the law. Again, for the CS, we all know the question that the CS did not address, and we're very interested in knowing why. We are now aware that some of the companies that tendered and were awarded these tenders to provide the PEPs were newly incorporated companies. If you look at the procurement procedures and the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, you cannot incorporate a company in February and then that company to develop capacity, technical, financial, and experiential capacity to be able to win huge tenders such as the ones that were reported to have been awarded. So I think there's a legitimate concern there that in terms of political accountability and moral accountability, the CS ought to have stepped aside or even fired. Now, when you're dealing with political accountability, that is completely different from criminal culpability. Criminal culpability, if there is evidence that can sustain a trial, they will be charged in court. But the fact that you're presiding over a ministry that has pre-qualified and awarded tenders to companies that are newly incorporated to provide PEPs in flagrant abuse of procurement procedures, you must take accountability. And I agree with Senator, because if there was nothing to raise the eyebrow, there would not have been the need to get investigation. So we expect both the CS, the PS, and the CEO of KEMSA to step aside.
Kagusha, what do you make of this whole scandal now?
Yeah, it's disheartening that we can talk about loss of funds when COVID-19 is concerned. And I want to believe that we should be able to follow up this issue to a good conclusion, especially the agencies that deal with corruption matters. And we have seen them in the past moving swiftly to handle and to deal with the cases of corruption. Probably the only area where really I would probably just disagree with both the panelists is on the issue of who is to step aside. Because I think the people who actually need to step aside and be dealt with accordingly are the officials of the senior officials in KEMSA. Why do I say this? In the past, we have seen naming of corrupt scandals or corruption scandals, and they have most of them have been named after the CSs, the ministers in charge. And sometimes that makes us lose focus, because when clearly you know that someone registered a company and went and used it for procurement purposes in a certain agency, then definitely me and you know very well that the person who is ultimately in charge in that department or in that agency is the CEO. There's also a board in that agency. We have a chairman of that board. Those people at that level are properly and fully and wholly responsible for what is happening in that agency. Now, what needs to be done is to target the issue of corruption in these agencies the right way. Because the moment now the moment you target the CAs, what we are likely to do is now to over-politicize this matter, and then you mix it too much with the 2022 politics to the extent that we lose the focus on where money went, who stole the money, and we concentrate a little bit much more on who do we curtail their political ambitions and such kind of things. And that way you find as now we start running on a wild goose chase. So I think let us target this corruption where it is, and if we have any political responsibility that is to be carried at this point, let it be up to the board level. One of the reasons why I insist on this is because we kind of see, and I want to give a benefit of doubt to the minister in charge of this docket, the CS, we kind of see some political goodwill from him, because you have heard him say severally that we are going to be dealing with the cartels in this ministry. We are going to be dealing with these agencies that have done business the wrong way. All of us know that KEMSA has not been doing business the right way. We know there has been inflation of prices. That has not started with the Waziri. This has been there long before the 5 months that the Waziri has served in this ministry. And I'm expecting, for example, KEMRI and other agencies, there is going to be a lot of issues probably unearthed. And a lot of things are coming from the instructions of the Waziri himself that go to this ministry, investigate. Let us know what exactly is happening. Now, if an investigation is done, commanded or initiated by the minister, and I'm saying this solely depending on looking at the information that was yesterday supplied in the National Assembly, which I was following, then you want to give that person a benefit of doubt because you are so new in the ministry, you have instructed for investigations to be done, and now a corruption scandal has been unearthed. Do we need to send you home, or do we need to support you to deal with that issue? So I think for once, it is important that we target this corruption scandal properly, deal with Manjari and his group. And what surprised me, or what is interesting, is when Manjari pointed out to Senator Chergai that he was receiving calls from the CS and the PS. What I did not hear is him also saying that he was receiving calls to act illegally. He was saying he was receiving calls. And I wonder, wouldn't you receive calls from your bosses? And clearly yesterday, when I listened again to the what was happening at the National Assembly, I could tell clearly the minister said, or the CS said, that the calls, the kind of calls he would give is, let us stop importing stuff, let us locally manufacture or buy from the local manufacturers. And of course, the issue of now over exceeding the budget, right, from 5 billion to 7 billion, is something that Manjari and his group and his board, they have really to account, and they have to give us reasons why this was done. And of course, as Kenyans, what we are looking forward to is recovery of this money. But once we now over-politicize the whole issue, we might just lose the direction from recovering this money, because this money has been lost within the last 3 months. And
Okay.
so this money, wherever it is, may not have been spent on probably capital, and recovering it now would probably be easier because it could be liquid somewhere in a bank.
Okay. Cherargei seems to disagree with that notion. Cherargei, in your view, who does the buck stop with?
I think I would want to invite my brother to look under Article 225, sub-Article 6 of the Constitution, where it is very clear on where the buck stops. And in the past, Kenyans have accused agencies that fight corruption that they are going for the small fish, yet we have bigger whales in corruption. And I think Mutai Kagwe, the minister in charge of health, is not a saint, and he used to tell us that he's dealing with cartels within the ministry. But according to the investigation the ad hoc committee has done, he is in the middle of this scam and the scandal that is within KEMSA, facing these allegations. Because my brother Wakili Steve Ogola has put it rightly. Why would you award tender to a company like Killing or other company that were implicated, that were formed in January, February? And yet this management, in fact, Cabinet Secretary yesterday, Mheshimiwa Kagwe, admitted that that he used to call KEMSA. He didn't go there personally. Well, and then the issue is, as when I asked the suspended CEO Jonah Manjari on the issue of this, he said he did not even receive instructions from the board, the KEMSA board, but he was receiving specific instructions from the minister in charge of cabinet secretary in charge of health and the PS. And I've heard my brother Kagusha talking about politics. I think when you want to go that route, I think you know that many people who have been implicated with corruption allegations or even other forms of corruption, specifically that have been allied to specific affiliation within the country, most of them are always told to step aside. They are arrested, they are taken to court. There is a lot of Kamata Friday arrest by DCI and other agencies. So what is special about the man in charge of health? And he must take a responsibility. In my own opinion, you can't only sacrifice small fish in this KEMSA scandal, like the CEO only and the board members. The cabinet secretary, the buck stops with him under the management, and he has a responsibility. He has political responsibility to run for department within the health department in KEMSA, KEMRI. Then if you want to isolate and say, for example, let us arrest people within KEMSA and leave the people in charge, which is the Minister of Health, what are you telling Kenyans? It's about double standards. So I would want to encourage my brother that let us look at these things objectively. This was a pandemic. We are now fighting the COVID infection across the country. It is so tragic. It is a cardinal sin where now frontline workers, health workers have died because of lack of PPEs or overpriced PPEs, the issue of masks, the issue of sanitizers, the issues of ensuring Kenyans are protected for this invisible enemy. And therefore, I still insist, from the facts that we have seen, from the information that we have, there was a part of negligence. I think the cabinet secretary did not become, because he even accepted that he could not go to, he has never visited physically KEMSA. Yet he is the man in charge of that Department of Health where KEMSA falls under him. That one does not mean that he has not taken his responsibilities well. And I remember, and that is why at this point we always call, even as the 21 days that were issued during Virtual Conference on the status of COVID by President and the Council of Governors, the only, in fact, if Cabinet Secretary wanted to even clear himself, to look like a saint, as Kagusha is trying to put, he should have at least stepped aside so that he can allow agencies. How can you investigate somebody who is in office? How will the DCI officers be able to get files? How can they investigate somebody who is in office, which is the status of a cabinet secretary, the status of a PS? So I still insist, let us divorce politics. If you want to go to the route of politics, we know members who are normally, or friends or allies of Deputy President, or most of them, when have been mentioned in corruption allegations, the same people have been calling for resignation. They have been rushed to court. So what is special about the Kagwe, CS, and also PS Susan Muchaja? And I think also the companies that have been implicated should be. I think the only mistake, and we notice as I conclude, Trevor, is when the CEO could not ensure that under the management of board within the KEMSA, for example, let me use that, the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency's board normally approves what we call procurement plan. I think when the mistake that the CEO and management committee did is moving the budget from 4.5 billion to 7.5 billion and not amending the procurement plan. I think that is where the mistake well, they should have amended the procurement plan and call even a virtual meeting for the KEMSA board so that the procurement plan could be amended. And that is where now public funds were being and you had even a contract of a particular company that was cancelled of more than 700 million. And I think all these things point that I want to urge my brother, let us allow judicial process to take its course. Let us not point politics. It is not political. I have not done anything. Let us avoid politics in this matter.
Okay. Let me bring in Steve Ogola on this. Steve Ogola, what happened to the presumption of innocence until proven guilty? Because we're dealing with a pandemic right now. So if all those heads step aside, what happens then?
Trevor, we have to decide whether we want to pontificate in the abstract or we want to have a rational conversation that is constitutionally inclined. Because if you are having a conversation that is constitutionally inclined, then you will see that the reason for CS Mutahi Kagwe to step aside is well established. And the reason has nothing to do with presumption of innocence. When you talk about presumption of innocence, Trevor, you're already entering the realm of criminal accountability. We are talking for CS Mutahi Kagwe, at this preliminary stage, the core concern is political accountability. The president appointed the CS under Article 131, 132 as part of the executive to help in the administration of the national government's functions. Now, there are genuine and legitimate concerns that KEMSA funds and the management of those COVID-19 funds have not been well applied. The CS has the overall political accountability. He needs to step aside, if only to boost public confidence. If you look at Article 73 of the Constitution, it talks about public officers holding that office and deploying that office for purposes of the benefit of the public and doing so in a manner that protects and promotes public confidence and public trust. Can we say, Trevor, with a degree of certainty and evidence that the manner in which the national government, Ministry of Health, and KEMSA have presided over COVID-19 funds boosts public confidence? For that reason alone, Mutahi Kagwe is on the spot, is in the eye of the storm, and he ought to have stepped aside. But if you look at the other more intimate corruption-related offenses that could emerge from this, and that is why even the CEO of KEMSA faces the real risk of being prosecuted, there are offenses like failing to follow procurement law, occasioning loss of public funds. Already we can see, Trevor, the mere fact that some companies that were newly incorporated were awarded these tenders at exorbitant prices. The mere fact that people who already got tenders were cancelled without due process. I think some offenses begin to manifest right there, and if investigation is completed, the CEO may be arrested and arraigned for criminal culpability. Remember, the distinction is when you're talking about people who are appointed on merit-based appointment by the Public Service Commission, such as the CEO of KEMSA. These are people that, if they are found to have flouted procurement laws, they will be charged with anti-corruption offenses. Now, for people like the CS, who are in the executive of the political wing of government, if they are found to have breached public trust, they may be removed from that office, even if not necessarily charged. I think the point to note is this: the concerns of Kenyans, which have triggered the investigations into the management and application of COVID-19 funds, is that there is now a genuine fear that those funds were not applied to the purpose for which they were intended. There is also a genuine concern that people made money unlawfully and ethically from this pandemic. There is also the other concern that the quality of these PEPs was wanting. There is also the other concern that even the counties were purchasing them not necessarily because they needed them, but because they wanted to be part of that chain of purchasing and saving and getting money out of it. As it is right now, Trevor, it is safe to say that if the CS resigned, that would be consistent with advancing the purpose of the Constitution, public accountability under Article 73 and Article 10.
Okay.
If the KEMSA CEO was arraigned in court, I would not be surprised, because already the fact that tenders were awarded without due regard to procurement laws is already manifesting. But we can await the full investigation to see the extent of violation or infractions on the law, and then to see who should be charged.
Okay.
Political accountability is not the same as criminal culpability.
All right.
On political accountability, the case for CS Mutahi Kagwe resigning is well established.
Okay. Kagusha, let me give you a chance to wrap up on this conversation before we start talking about the revenue divide, which is the next subject we are going to. What is your argument, Kagusha? You're the County Assembly Speaker of Nyeri. If something goes wrong there, shouldn't you take responsibility?
You know, we are in agreement with both the gentlemen about what has been happening and what really ails us in this area of COVID-19 expenditure. So as to the issue of misuse of funds, I do not think we disagree. Probably I think the only area where I'm differing with my brothers is really on the issue of rushing again to the CS to resign. You know, maybe I just want to inform Senator Cherargei that I am on record having really discouraged this issue of what he calls the kamata kamata on Fridays and even political targeting. I'm one person who have really campaigned against that reason, because when we do that, a lot of times we end up making these corruption scandals sensational, and then we end up losing focus a lot of times. So you find that we go to the newspapers, in fact, we give an account of what is happening in terms of investigations. But again, when you go to the courts, what do? You lose the case because you did not even take time to collect or to piece together proper evidence that can sustain a case. So a lot of times it just becomes a sensational scandal in our dailies. It tops the newspaper headlines and titles. And in that manner, we have always been losing. And sometimes I actually think it is targeted. It's actually the same political system which throws us this kind of dust so that our eyes cannot see properly on the very, very target that we are looking at. Why are we not talking about the KEMSA board, for example, resigning? I think that is really where we should be targeting. Can we have the board resign? Can we have the board sent home and suspended for a proper investigation? And then I also ask, if you have cabinet secretaries who want to be bold enough to demand or initiate investigations in their agencies, do you think in future they are going to be very keen on any scandals being mentioned in their ministries, or even initiating those kind of investigations so that a scandal can be unearthed? Because if really that happens, you will say the minister to take responsibility. Now, you have mentioned the issue of county governments, because you find again, as Ogola properly puts it, you have a gravy train again also in the counties of misusing these funds. You find that a lot of this money that has gone to the counties has not been used for the core reasons that we have this money. It's used mainly for auxiliary and non-core issues. Now, are we going to have all the governors again stepping aside, or do we target areas and people who are properly responsible for this? What I think is that let us target properly, so that once we have done proper targeting, we are then going to have the real culprits. And then as we move on with these cases and the investigations, then if there is any reason then that implicates properly the CSs and the PSs, then that can be raised. But at this initial stage, I think we just need to give them benefit of doubt. I think Senator says that Mutahi Kagwe has not gone to KEMSA himself and says that is abdication of his responsibilities. But at the same time, we say that he should take political responsibility, because apparently Manjari said that he was called. So what's the difference? What is even better, calling or even going there physically? You know, sometimes I think we mix these issues. So I think let us follow this money, because I know for sure, and as it has been clearly put, we have issues of misappropriation of funds. We have cases of procurement that was done, not in the right manner. Really, do we have the minister who ordered for a company that had no experience to be included in the procurement list, or is the minister the one who ordered for the budget to be increased from 5 billion to 7 billion without proper authorization of Treasury? You know, really, we need to be fair so that if we target properly, as Kenyans, we are also going to recover these monies. Otherwise, Kenyans, of course, are very mad and they are very upset. They are not happy at all about this kind of loss of funds. And I think it's an issue that we should properly follow to a conclusion so that we can have this money recovered, and also the involved officials can take political and also criminal responsibility where it is necessary.
All right. Cherargei, let me bring you back on this issue, because now let's talk about the counties. I was speaking to the chair of the Senate Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19 yesterday, that's Senator Sylvia Kasanga, and she told me an Auditor General's report whereby 13.1 billion shillings was sent to the counties. Only about 3.1 billion shillings can be accounted for. The other 10 billion has either been used for other purposes or is simply not being accounted for. How should this issue be handled at the county level? Should we have all these governors stepping aside? Because out of the list you gave me, over 7 counties, Bomet being one of them, that has not given any accountability purposes of the money that was allocated to them.
Of course, I agree, but that money that was meant, and the counties follow very well in the Tumkemsa scandal, and I agree. I've seen that report that was released last week. I think it is your station that also ran an in-depth analysis on counties, and I think you are forgetting that the same counties did also supplementary budget. Even my own county, Nandi, through the Nandi County Assembly, they also did a supplementary budget where they reallocated funds to support the COVID. There were allocation of funds from the national government through the National Treasury. And I have indicated earlier on when I made my opening remarks that some counties even spend on some issues that are not necessarily essential in the fight against the COVID pandemic within counties. And of course, it points to one that there should be a multi-agency investigation by the necessary agencies. And I know EACC and DCI have the necessary capacity to track some of these monies that have been used in counties. And I think when this shall be done, there is a ruling that was done by Mumbi Ngugi. And if governors are found, you have seen the governor of Migori, because of not being allowed to access office, he has been told to be barred from office, and it's like that he has been told to step aside. And that is why we are also insisting on the cabinet secretary in charge of Mutahi Kagwe. The reason even Mumbi Ngugi ruling is trying to point at governors that they should not access office is simply to allow investigators or not to interfere with some of the crucial documents that may form part of the basis. So I agree that the counties must be investigated, and I have seen many counties, some of them have refused even to submit their expenditure. I told they also overport PPEs, apart from even spending outside what is required to cover all these issues. The PPEs, the masks, the sanitizers, among other allowances to the COVID workers, Trevor. Others have not been even able to use funds in some things that are not essential. Even, for example, some counties were using the same COVID fund to buy fuel. Yet they have suppliers that are already qualified to supply fuel, oil, and lubricants. You have seen even others are using money to buy airtime. Yet those they normally take interest on some of those issues or expenses within the county government. So I agree. And by the way, should any governor be found culpable, Mumbi Ngugi ruling has already set a precedent. Of course, they will be barred from accessing office, and other junior officers that might be implicated in misuse of COVID funds within the counties. And as a Senate, we have pronounced ourselves on this matter, that when the ad hoc committee will tackle its report on the recommendation way forward, we will also, apart from, and I want to rectify what my brothers, with all due respect, Senator Kagusha, Speaker of the Nyeri County Assembly, has said, is that in as much as any ordinary citizen can inform investigative agencies to start any investigation, but EACC and DCI have what we call suamoto powers. They can even start investigations on their own when even an ordinary citizen can report that there is a miss somewhere. So I think on counties, and I expect Speaker Kagusha in Nyeri County to take the lead and ensure that he guides MCAs properly, to ensure that if there were misuse of funds within Nyeri County government executive, they must take responsibility. But when it will come to the Senate, and in case of the Public Accounts Committee of the Senate, I can assure you, Trevor, will not be lenient, but to ensure to use our powers that has been provided by the Constitution to ensure anybody who might have touched any money that was meant to fight COVID in this country are punished through the law.
All right. I have to take a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, we'll still continue with that conversation in just a bit, and then we'll get to the conversation around the revenue divide. Samson Cherargei Mheshimiwa from Nandi is with me, the senator from there, and Honorable John Kagusha, Nyeri County Assembly Speaker, is still with me also, and Steve Ogola, advocate of the High Court. We're continuing this, tracing the COVID-19 billions from the national government to the counties. I'd like to hear your views. There's a lot of them coming through. I'll read them in just a bit. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We're back shortly.